Hello and welcome to Intentional Conversations Virtual Community Chat. My name is Dr. Nika White and I am the owner of Nika White Consulting, a management consulting firm that intersects the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership in business. And we are so honored to be able to hold space for this community week after week, every Friday from 11 to 12. We're a little bit off schedule today because we had a situation and I think it's appropriate for us to talk about it. We had a hacker that entered into our safe space, and it was definitely something unexpected, and I was not willing to subject my audience to that, and so we abruptly ended the Zoom call. But myself and my co-host decided we would not let the enemy win on this, and we were going to certainly come out victorious. So we want to get this story, we want to get this information to our audience, and so we will make sure that we follow up this afternoon as we normally do with an email with this recording. And so first and foremost, I want to just acknowledge and give a formal introduction of my guest co-host. Her name is Charnise Mangle, and I'm so excited for you all to have the chance to meet her. Charnise is an extraordinary social studies teacher, literacy teacher, and literacy coach, commentator, and keynote speaker. She has created a classroom where students can learn about United States history and the Constitution in a fun and creative way as she guides them on a journey of personal civic duty and community understanding. She believes she has been called to raise the next generation to become critical thinkers and people of progress. She now opens up her classroom to all people who want to begin a journey of self-education guided by a compiled list of resources that she has curated. As an African-American United States history teacher, Charnise has seen a void in education as it pertains to discussion on American racism. She has compiled this list of resources to help guide each of us on our journey of self-education about racism in America. She just recently joined the faculty of South Carolina Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities for her first year starting this fall after 6 years at Wade Hampton High School in Greenville. She will also be teaching United States government and economics and is excited to create new and engaging lessons. The last thing I'll share is that it was imperative for Charnise to use her research as a history teacher and literacy teacher to advance the understanding of race and racism in America. She hopes to help people learn and understand these issues and promote dialogue in the family and in the home. So first and foremost, I am so grateful that you're generous with your time and lending your voice to me and this community. And so just welcome and thank you so very much, Charnise. Allow yourself an opportunity to provide a greeting to our audience today.
Well, hey guys, my name is Charnise Mangle, as Dr. White has already stated. I'm super excited to be with you guys. It is an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to be with you guys. I'm actually on vacation right now, so if you hear the cicadas or anything going on, I apologize in advance, but I just really wanted to be a part of this conversation that I couldn't let just being on vacation rob me of this opportunity. I am just happy to be here. Yeah.
Yes. And thank you so much for pushing through immediately once we had to end the previous Zoom call because of the hackers. She sent me a text and it was like, so what do we do? What do we do? And then I reached out and I said, okay, we can't be defeated. I mean, honestly, she had to talk me off of the ledge because I was really in my emotions. I was feeling very emotionally charged and I was starting to feel defeated. But Charnise, you were so gracious and just reminding me that it's because the work that we're doing, you, myself, and others in this space is important and it's worthy. And now it's attracting the attention of those detractors who want to steal our joy and just keep us from using our voices in a way that is productive and helps us all to emerge stronger. So I thank you for that. I really do. I appreciate that. So let's jump right in. We have already shared your accolades and all of the great things that you're doing from a professional perspective. But I always like to get people to share their story. What inspires you? What can you share with us about Charnise that did not come out into, of course, the bio that I read in your introduction?
Oh man, what inspires me is just kids. I love children, like literally, at all ages, really. I have a little niece, and she is 15 months old, and the people who follow me already, they know how much I love my niece. I get the privilege of taking care of her every other day, and it's just a real special time for us. But I really think that those critical years are those upper high school years and those first couple of years into college or into your career. And I just think it's such formative time in young people's lives. And because it is such a formative time, I just felt like it was something I could do to give back to the community, was to really pour into that unique group of individuals, because they are starting to gain their understandings of who they are, their identity is being formed, and it's critical. And so they really need people who are for them and who can make things relevant to them so that they will be able to care about those things. And specifically for social studies, I would say to be civic minded so that they can bring forth the future that we all want. And I think in order to be able to do that, they have to have adults who are champions for them. And so I just want to be the champion, and I want to inspire the next generation to literally be all that they can be and to rise to the occasion that I know, I think that so many other people know that they can be at, but it takes a unique person who loves that demographic of student and that age group. So that's what really inspires me.
I love that. Our community is so fortunate to have you. And I'm glad that you are still, in the classroom, because that's really important. I know that there's some people right now in that profession from an educator perspective that are maybe rethinking whether or not that is the correct path for them, especially with all that's going on with the global pandemic. But I am so grateful to educators all over these days. And so anytime I encounter one, I always like to make sure that I express that. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for raising up the next generation. And I have to say, I have been impressed with younger generations around how woke they are about what's happening right now. Are you seeing the same thing, even like with the high school students that you've been encountering?
Oh, definitely. Even, with our technical difficulties, actually a few of my former students who are seniors and juniors at Duke University, at Clemson University, UGA, they actually had joined and had sent me messages that I was getting on, that they were getting on. And yes, they are all about this work. One of my former students who's at CFC, he is literally kind of leading some of the diversity and inclusion at the College of Charleston, which I'm so excited about. I have other students who are on the government structure for Clemson University, who are leading the charge in what Clemson is doing, and are part of the Honors College, who led the charge in getting the name changed. And a lot of them have reached out during all of this to say, it started with your class, that it started with you. And we're just so thankful with that. I have seen that, them carrying the torch in a unique way that honestly is only how they could do it, because they are so savvy with the technology, are able to leverage technology in a way that even people as young as me don't really know how to leverage TikTok to be educational. So it's just really awesome to see what they're doing.
No, I love that. And I share with you that my daughter is a graduate of Wade Hampton High School, which is where you just transitioned from. And I don't know exactly where her inspiration came from to be somewhat of an activist around diversity, equity, and inclusion, but she has also transferred that passion and that knowledge base to the work that she's doing at the University of South Carolina. And this community knows that for those who joined last week, and I know that you were part of one of the audience members last week, she was one of our guest co-hosts, her and her dad, talking about how they have felt called to action during this time. And so it's so great to see. I think there's so much for each of us as adults to learn from the younger folks right now. Yes. In terms of what they're doing. And so I've been really inspired by it. So let's talk about this incredible resource that you have compiled for the benefit of each of us self-educating ourselves. Tell us what the process was to compile all of the data that went into that, the text, and what some of the results that you're seeing so far by having that resource available to people.
Yes, okay. So I'm one of those types of people. I think there were 3 questions there, and I'm going to try to take one, and then I know I'm going to forget the other one, but please just remind me, what about that? And I'll definitely be able to answer that. So the inspiration behind understanding race and racism is, what happened with Mr. George Floyd. That's where it all started, honestly, for me, in the sense of it was the timing. I was so upset. I was so frustrated. I was exhausted by what I had just seen. And when I say seen, I did not actually watch the video of Mr. Floyd losing his life. I just couldn't, that wasn't something I needed to partake in for me. But just watching the short clips that I did watch of what happened, reading what I read about it and everything, I was so frustrated, Dr. White, and just overwhelmed with a lot of emotions. kind of what your husband actually said last week, where it was just like this whole range of emotions that he was going through. But at the end of the day, when he wanted to shut down, he had to remind himself that that's no way to be, right? And so that, and that's no way to be specifically, he spoke about as a believer. And that's where I'm coming from as well. Like as a Christ follower, for me, when I began to shut down on about Friday or Saturday, I realized, is that really the person that I want to be? Is that really who I feel like God, who Jesus has called me to be in the world? And I realized really quickly on Saturday afternoon, no. But then I also realized that I didn't have the strength to do anything to change how my flesh felt. And so I just began to pray very fervently on Saturday night and into Sunday, that the Lord would give me a word to strengthen me and to rejuvenate me and to give me the eyes that I needed in order to do whatever it was that he wanted me to do. And so my brother in Christ, but a very close friend of mine, Will Funk from Grace City Church out in Charleston, gave an amazing sermon on what was going on. And in that sermon, I was able to really hold on to the words of Micah and really push myself forward. And so by Monday afternoon, I was crying out, literally lamenting, what are my next steps, Lord? And then on Tuesday, I literally woke up that morning. I talked to some friends on Monday afternoon. And on Monday, I woke up, called another friend. We talked for a little while. And I just opened up a blank Google Doc on Tuesday. And by 11:57 p.m. that same day, I had a fully functioning website, which I did not have before. Wow. I had an ebook PDF download that you could go on this website and download immediately. And it all happened, in about 16 hours. And that's the Lord for me. Like that, it just poured out of me. And to your other question, what's in there? Like what's the information that we can learn? It's podcasts, articles, mini-series, documentaries, anything that I have used in my own classroom, literally, with my own students, and seen the way that as young people they have responded, and then things that I have talked about with my friends and they have responded. I kind of went through those things and began to do a history lesson, because that's what I feel like people don't understand and don't know, is that they don't understand and they don't know the history of the United States as it specifically pertains to race and racism, and that they want to do the work. That's why part of the subtitle is for self-exploration, is because they want to do the work, but they can't, because they don't know where to start. So many people don't know how to research on their own. And so that's where I am helping to guide them and to begin that journey of research and where to start, because I don't want you to end up in some, other place that you did not intend to end up because you didn't know where to start. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. What's been the reaction so far?
The reaction has been overwhelming. I was shocked by how many people wanted to learn about this stuff, that wanted to know and wanted to engage. And so, obviously, I made it and I sent it to my close family and friends, and I was like, oh yeah, they'll maybe buy it, maybe just to support me because they love me, and they know I've been talking about these things for a long time, so maybe they'll buy it. But literally they bought it and then they shared it with all of their friends. Like literally I had friends who were like, I just sent it to 50 family members and told them why, told them about who you are, because I love you and you're awesome. And they put context around who I was, so that other people would engage. And then I had so many people that first day that I officially released it on social media sharing it. And so the response, Dr. White, has been amazing. And I'm really thankful for it. And it has also created space for me to continue to make additional resources. I have a one for parents as they are having these conversations with their children that will be released soon. And then I have one that I'm working with for an organization that really wants to learn more. And lots of things have just happened. People are just reaching out and asking me, can I do that? And I haven't really necessarily even developed some of these things, but I have the capacity to do that. It's just a matter of sitting down and creating time, which I'm doing because, again, I'm a teacher and so I'm off this summer. So it's all kind of working together.
No, that is amazing. So I want to talk about, again, so we're having conversations right now all over. Kids are going to be returning to school, perhaps in some capacity or another in the fall. And that is creating obviously a lot of anxiety for parents and for educators, rightfully so. Just want to get your reactions to how you're feeling about the return to the classrooms. And again, I know that you're going from more of a traditional school to one that's a little bit different. And so you'll have to share with this audience about the South Carolina Governor's School. I know many of us in South Carolina know about it, but we have audience members that are joining from all over. So what are your thoughts about returning to school?
Oh, no, it has been again, a roller coaster of emotions, honestly. When we, ended when COVID really began back on March 13th, I actually told my students, because I've been talking about it since January, what I felt like was going to be a pandemic pretty early on. When they left, I said, if this is the last time I see you, I love you, and it was, it was kind of in light, like I really felt like school might end, but I didn't think that we would never go back to school during that school year.
Yeah.
And so I knew that we were making the right decisions when we made those decisions. And as the summer has continued and how our numbers, particularly in Greenville, South Carolina, have gone up and everything, I do think that the right decision for me personally is what the decision that the Governor's School, where I'm transitioning to, has already made, because the Governor's School is a school for students across South Carolina. It's a public school, actually. A lot of people think it's a private school or a charter school, but it's actually a public school. And any student who participates in the fine arts, visual arts, drama, music, things like that, they can apply. And it's a boarding school, so they live there. It's a residential school. And so we have made a decision to not go back in the fall, and that we will revisit that in January. Now, I will say that what the governor has stated, actually, since I've been on vacation, I'm on vacation right now. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but since I've been on vacation, the governor has said a lot of things that have changed what we decided a few weeks ago. And so I don't know if we're actually going to be in school now at this point. And so that is concerning to me, because as I stated, the Governor's School is a residential school. So it's not like there's a way to quarantine students should something happen very quickly. The teachers, the staff, the other students are at high risk of transmission because of our living arrangement that the students are living together, and that the teachers are kind of coming essentially into their living space to meet with them and to converse with them. Coming from Wade Hampton High School, which is where I was, a traditional school, I think that it sounds like, from what I understand, again, I'm on vacation, so I haven't done all the reading that I would like to do, but Dr. Royster is seeming to be kind of voicing a lot of his opinion that that's not best practices. And he's essentially fighting the good fight for teachers and students and our safety in this regard. So I'm really thankful for what I'm hearing coming out of Greenville and what's going on. I just really want this to be taken seriously, because if we put ourselves in a risky situation with having, 14 high schools, large high schools, and all the elementary and middle schools that we have, we could be in a dangerous situation,
No, absolutely. And it's, it's a tough situation across, so many different areas when you consider all the implications of not returning to school and people really wanting to ensure that they are able to, get back to work. But yeah, I don't at all envy those who are in the decision-making capacity around this, because it's tough. It really is tough. And so thank you for sharing your thoughts. So there's someone in your life very special to you by the name of Miss Rita Pearson, and she is an educator. And here is something that I think is a quote that she's credited for that means a lot to you. So I want to get you just to react to it. Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best they can possibly be. Who is Miss Pearson to you, and what type of inspiration has she had on how in which you show up in the classroom and for families and students and all of those that are in your circle?
Dr. White, Rita Pearson, if you only knew, I'm gonna tell you, so you will know actually. Dr. White, Rita Pearson to me is the educator of all educators, in my humble opinion. she I don't know where she's originally from, but she resided in Texas for a long time. And I think that's where most of her teaching career took place. And she she actually passed away, I think maybe in like around 2013-ish. And the reason I know that is because I actually tried to find her gravesite to bring her flowers, because I talk in my family, we talk a lot about honoring people and giving them their flowers when they're alive. But I actually discovered her, a few years before she passed away. And so I wanted to give her the flowers that I could give her by paying respect to her. And I couldn't find it, long story short. But I just believe that what the quote that you just said is the essence of who I want to be as an educator, that children and families, they need people who want to champion the cause for them and to love them and to meet the child wherever they are and bring them to wherever it is that they need to be at, and to partner with the parents and with the family members in order to make that possible and to make that happen. And I think so many times as educators, because we are bombarded with the bureaucracy of education and so many other things that are pulling at us and desiring our attention, that we get distracted from what is the thing that we need to be doing. And the thing that we need to be doing is to be the champion for the child, and to fight for that child and the needs and the things that they need in order to get them to where they are going to be and where they can be. And we cannot afford to be distracted by all the other things. And so Rita Pierson is just, I believe, a woman after God's heart, who has the calling of teaching and who desires to fight the good fight in order to do what is right on behalf of students and parents, to make society a better place of community where we can all benefit from.
Well, I'm so glad that she is an inspiration for you. Her life work was an inspiration for you, and that now you're kind of carrying that torch and that banter, because we need more teachers, more educators that are keenly aware that each student has a story. And even beyond how they show up in that classroom, they have a story. And understanding and empathizing with that story, I think it allows educators to be much more effective in reaching that student and helping that student show up at his or her best. And so I really appreciate that. One of the things we talk about often here in this community is the need to share stories, to get people proximate to the lived experiences of those who are directly impacted by racism or any other inequities or oppression, discrimination. And so I remember just the other day, I was holding space for another community, and we were just sharing and learning with and from each other in solidarity. And there was a female that was part of this community, and she was Hispanic. And as she was sharing her story with the audience, she talked about the fact that when she first became awakened to racism, it was as a young child, like in the first grade, and she would go home every day, and her mom would say, well, where's your homework? Or where's your homework? And she would always say, I don't have any homework. I don't have any homework.
Yes.
And then she said that her parents eventually kind of became concerned about that. And they're like, well, what teacher just never assigns homework? I mean, now you have those teachers that may not assign it all the time, but what teacher never assigns any kind of homework? So they finally had a conversation, and the teacher was assigning homework all the time, but the teacher was not given this Hispanic student homework. And in that moment, as she was telling that story, she broke. And as a young child in the first grade, she realized that my teacher had no faith in me.
Wow.
And it had a lot to do with what she perceived to be who she was as a Hispanic individual, as a Hispanic child, to where they didn't even care enough to even give the homework or make sure she did the homework. They didn't even give it or assign it to her. And so I share that story because our kids are so impressionable. They are paying attention. And even if we think that they don't realize what's going on, in terms of racism, discrimination, and equities, they do. And you have such a heart for that. You pay close attention to that. And I think that makes you probably even more effective as an educator. But I'm sure that as a person of color, a woman of color, you can probably point to many different stories throughout your life where you have been awakened to racism. Because again, people of color, we experience that, we know that. But is there a defining moment in particular, a story in particular for you, Charnise, that really stands out as you think about racism and what you've had to endure and experience?
And just to make sure that I hear you correctly, you're saying my personal experiences with race and racism Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like when something that was defining moment for you, where you recognize, because that was a defining moment for her, and she was, in the first grade. Defining moment for her was realizing that her teacher very deliberately did not assign her homework because
I would say a defining moment for me, it kind of continues to happen. I know that sounds kind of wild maybe, but like representation matters. And I think that I didn't fully understand when I was growing up that I didn't see a lot of representation at the high school that I went to, which was Malden High at the time. And throughout my education experience, I didn't have a lot of teachers who were people of color in general, and definitely not even African-American females in my life who reflected me. And then being at Wade Hampton High School for 6 years, and there being out of a staff of about 130-ish, there's only 9 African-American educators. And so with that being the representation that the students see, it's very small. And so I just really believe that when we have proper representation, that students can really reach the expectations, because we can call them into that in a different and unique way because of our lived experiences, you know? And so for me, as a young African-American female, I have seen the impact of who I am and how that impacts young people who are wanting to do either what I do or do something even different. They see what I'm doing and how I have overcome different things, and they know that they can also achieve. And so I would say just continued conversations with young people when they see me and they are like, wow, if she did it, I can do it. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, exactly. And that's why representation, to your point, is so important. People are able to then internalize that this is possible for me as well, because I see this possible for you, and you look like me. Your skin looks like me. And that is so critical, especially again in those environments where you have these impressionable minds and they are making decisions about what type of interest they want to have that could lead to, career decisions. And so I totally appreciate what you're saying there. So let's talk about, how do you effectively have the conversation of racism with kids? And I would imagine that it varies based upon the ages. And so why don't you just share, because your new tool that's coming out is, I believe it's for kids that are what to age what? What's that age range?
So actually, the age range is going to be from 0 to 6, but even within that, I'm going to be breaking it down, because throughout the research that I've done, I have certifications in high school primarily, but then I have my K through 12 literacy. And what I've been doing through my research is that I've noticed that different age ranges need different conversations and different books and everything, obviously, but like you can't even do 0 to 6. You need to be breaking that down from 0 to a few months to like 1 to 3, and then from 4 to 6. Does that make sense? So it'll be broken.
But I'm so intrigued, Charnise. You're saying 0 to 6 years old, and then so I'm thinking about 0 to 1 to 2. What can you teach a child at 0 to 1 to 2 about racism?
Yeah, well, they are actually, science shows that they're starting to make conclusions about certain things and about people, and depending on how diverse their parents and their families' lifestyle is, and especially in an age of COVID where we're just not even seeing that many people, right? They're making conclusions about race as early as 6 months, and so they are understanding, even though they cannot communicate. And that's what people misunderstand a lot about children, is that because they can't communicate, it means that they don't understand. But actually, so much understanding is happening developmentally that they cannot articulate to you in words. And so children are actually doing a lot of judgments. They're doing groupings together based off of skin color, actually. And so people think, oh, I just won't talk about that until they get older and they can better understand, thinking when they can communicate with me. But no, you're actually making those decisions as you are showing them literature, right? So if there's not diverse characters in the book, then you're actually telling them something without actually telling them something. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. So what about the older youth? Okay, you're past that little stage where, of course, it's just kind of what they see, how they're interacting with things. they're now a little bit older. What advice do you have for parents and educators for introducing, again, and having this race conversation?
Yes, so as they get older, the conversation is just adjusting for age appropriateness, right? So it's like there are certain things that as a parent, I'm not one, so I won't speak to those different things that parents have to talk to their children about. But as a parent, my understanding is that you have to talk to your child about different things. It's the same actual concept, but the conversation looks different as they grow older, right? It's like when you are going to put your child into daycare or into someone else's care, you talk to them about some things about, you know, where people should engage with them in their physical space, right? And that conversation changes as they get older. And so what I want parents to understand is that the conversation on race and racism has to begin also in infancy, and it's going to change over time as the child gets older. And so when the child gets older, we're thinking like middle school, high school, you're having more direct conversation, and you're bringing in specific language that you didn't bring in maybe because you were making analogies as when they were children. And so my high school students are, I would say that the ebook that I have already developed is actually an appropriate resource for high school students. There are like two, I think, things by Ava DuVernay that is MA, but I think there's nothing that I think that parents would disagree with other than showing the graphic nature of our history in America with lynchings. But I think with proper dialogue with parents, we can overcome those things that are going to be difficult, because we actually have to face and see some of our history in order to really move the conversation forward and do the changes that we need to do. And so I think explicit conversations as they get older with visual representation is something that changes from the child to the preteen to the teenager. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I appreciate you giving us that level of context around it, because I know that I have personally been in conversations with several parents who have said, you know, I feel like I need to now have this direct conversation. And I am a big advocate of, instead of us trying to feel like we need to have these massive goals where we're conquering Rome in a day, let's think about the immediate circles where we have influence to make a difference. And that's within our homes, within our families. And so parents were saying, I'm feeling the need to now have this very direct conversation with my, you know, kids and about racism, and I don't know where to start. I'm not sure how to even broach that conversation. And you and I have a mutual friend, Ann Smith, and she was sharing with me that as she was starting to have the conversation with Max, one of her sons, who's maybe like 6 or 7, she said that initially she was not allowing him to watch television and the protests and the replays of all of the horrific events, because she wanted to shield him for that. And so her way of introducing the conversation was, hey, Max, sit with me and let's kind of watch this together. And she said that as he was watching it, he stopped her and said, Mommy, shouldn't this be in black and white? Because he was thinking, no, this happened a long time ago. Why is this in color, Mommy? And she had to say, no, this is right now. This is right now. And so it just, I don't know, that was so piercing to me to hear her tell that story. But I think that we need to help control the narrative, because our kids are getting information anyway from other sources. And so would we not want to make sure that what they're being exposed to, that we are communicating in a way that is sensitive to their little ears and their minds, but at the same time is also not diluting really what's happening? And so what are your thoughts about that?
Dr. White, that's a major key, is not diluting, not trying to change the truth. Because when you begin to do those types of things, what you're doing is actually you're telling them a false narrative that they begin to get very confused with as they grow older, and as they get more of the information, they kind of begin to think, well, are you, my teacher, and this textbook and these primary sources that we're engaged with, are they honest and truthful, or are my parents? Because they don't line up. They don't make any sense. And so I think that that's why I always say the language I like to use is age appropriateness, because we still have to tell the truth. We just have to tell the truth in an age appropriate way. We cannot dilute the truth. We have to just make it palatable for young people and for their lived experiences and what they understand at that particular age. And so what I mean by that is I liken it to like the Bible in and of itself kind of has a lot of like interesting stories that would be very hard for a young person to navigate and to understand. However, if you look at things like the Jesus Storybook Bible, if you've ever heard about that, but it's a Bible that tells the truth, but it tells it in, again, an age-appropriate way. And so we cannot dilute this truth. It is confusing, and quite frankly, in some regards, depending on how some parents shape things, it can almost be an outright lie. And I know that's the harsh language potentially, but like, it's just what I have experienced with young people, and to see their frustration in their eyes when they have these conversations at dinner with their parents, and they come back and they say, you know, this is what happened when I brought this up to my parents. It's really sad, you know, because the way that I operate in my classroom is we use primary sources. And so the child is not going home and saying, well, Miss Mangle taught us this, or this textbook taught us this. They're saying, well, I read the secession papers of South Carolina, and this is what the legislators at that time said that they were seceding for these reasons. So what you're telling me, Mom and Dad, is actually not true based off of what the people during that time who seceded said. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. That's really good. So now a big question that I've been pondering, and so many people have been pondering for quite some time now. What is it going to take to get African-American history, the full history, the way that it needs to be presented, into the history books in schools?
What it's going to take is going to take continued activism, honestly, and people bringing it to the legislators and to the people at the South Carolina Department of Education who make our standards. We have to be a part of those conversations, and we have to be at those tables. For me, even personally, I was actually invited to the table as we were restructuring our standards, and I wasn't able to remain on there because I was in grad school at the time, and so it was just a little too much to navigate all the responsibilities there. But it's things like that, like when we are invited to those tables, we have to be there and show up, you know, and if we can't be there and show up, we have to have the names of other people that we can say, hey, can you go in my stead so that you can speak to these things to make sure that they are talking about adding these things to the standards, because standards are all not constantly, I should say, but every 10 years pretty much they're being reevaluated. In 8 to 10 years, they're being readapted and put out again to the educators as what to follow, a common source of knowledge. And we have to be a part of those conversations and those dialogues as educators, and not only being invited to the table, Dr. White, but we also have to create the table sometimes for ourselves. We have to say that this is a necessary course that does not even exist yet, but we're going to create the syllabi and the work that is necessary in order to create it. For example, it is my heart's desire at the governor's school, we have to create at least one elective. And so it is my hope that I will, at minimum, right now, I have the thought process and the working syllabi for 2 different courses, a history through cinema, U.S. history through cinema, watching documentaries and movies, and then also this, race and racism in America. And so we have to push those narratives, because once you create the syllabus, actually, it can be available to all South Carolina schools as well to adopt if they would like.
Yeah.
Knowledge and then action, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I even think about when I was, you know, going through, you know, school, and I mean, you know, it was we all knew about Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, but beyond that, you know, I felt as though there was nowhere near the depth of historical reference that allowed us, you know, to fully understand it. I mean, even in my adult life now, I feel like I'm learning about some circumstances that are just way beyond me. When you consider Juneteenth, I've heard many adults say, I'm just now learning about it, just maybe like, you know, in the past couple years as it's gotten some additional attention. And so I do think that's an area of improvement, is for schools to really round out the type of history, to make sure that communities of color can understand about really their history. And so I'm a big advocate of that. So I'm glad to know that at least within the influence that you have at the governor's school, you're going to take those electives and to allow that history to come forth. And so thank you so much. So I know that we are small in numbers right now, but for those who are on the line, if you have any questions, I want to give you a chance to either unmute yourself right now. Maybe it's a question, or perhaps you would like to just add to our discussions and contribute to the dialogue. want to give you a chance to do that, and you also can feel free to use the chat room as well. And Charnise, what I would like for you to do is let's make sure that we put into the chat the resources, so maybe the link to your website so people can get that resource. And I know that you're working on another one that's going to be released relatively soon. So maybe even share a little bit about that as well into the chat. Any questions or thoughts right now to contribute to this discussion? I see Miss Glenda Morrison-Fair is on the line, and as someone who is deeply connected into the education system, I'm really interested to get her thoughts. If she would like to unmute herself and share some thoughts with us, we really would appreciate it.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Hi, I'm sitting in England, in the south of England, and the subject of race has become really central in England, and it looks like it's never been talked before, despite that there is a history of Black people and ethnic minority living here for a long time. So I am involved in a project that it's a small project that just started 2 years ago, and it's called Racial Harassment Forum. It's when people get be attacked, and when there be an incident of racism, they can call us instead of police, because there've been so many incidents of racism that the police don't know how to deal with, or they just ignore, and nothing has been recorded. So we now trying to work with schools because there's been a lot of racism in schools. But I don't know in the US, but in England, children tend to not to tell the parents because they don't want the parents to see the parents upset. So they tend not to say anything. They get racism at school, and they don't want to share any. Not because they're just worried about their parents, the reaction. Because in England there is all this, the old generation immigrants, and there is a new immigrant. So not many people know how to deal with. Some parents, they just panic and they want to go and burn the school. Or so there's all these things children want to protect. I was going to ask you, as educators, will you encourage a child to report the racism? If, for example, if he goes to school and they meet racism, like there's been an incident on his way to school or inside the school, will you, in the US, or will you advise the child to report in schools, at school with the teacher, if the teacher was a kind of, if it's not, it's a white or someone who is not familiar to the racism, or they don't share the same race, because that's what's the main problem. The children tend not to tell the teacher because they feel like they don't really connect. So what will you advise for the children to do?
What I hear, is it Viz?
Yes.
I want to make sure that I understand the question that you're asking. Are you saying when the students of color experience racism, you're asking should they report it to their teachers, even though their teachers are not the same racism or not people of color themselves?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I can't really necessarily speak to what's going on in England or how things are, and you all's relationship necessarily, but like in America, I would definitely encourage the children, regardless, to report, and to have their parents also to report, because and I would also say, I don't know, what emails necessarily look like for you guys, but I'm assuming that emails are legal documentation. But emails in America, especially when a student emails a teacher on their teacher email, that is legally binding. And so if I was to get an email from a student and I did not respond to it, and there was a problem that arose later on, that would be a very bad situation for me as the educator, regardless of race, because the child is letting me know that they are feeling harassed, uncomfortable, belittled, whatever it is, through a form of legal documentation, and then making a formal complaint with the school, with the administration would be my guidance. And then to also speak with guidance. You guys have counseling, school counseling groups at school, but that would be also my recommendation there. But it needs to be the student and the parent, because the parent is the advocate for the student, would be my major key.
Yeah. So do you expect the experience to be shared, like the teachers, or sorry, the school will we will communicate with the parent after there been an incident? For example, if a child call another child N-word, for example, will you expect that incident that happens to school will be communicated with the child's parents? The parents will be notified such an incident.
Yeah, in America.
In England, because the this is what we're trying to campaign in England, because of the so you have the Tories who are like conservatives, so they have abolished the schools. They don't have to report because it's already written, it's bounded. So the school, it doesn't really look good to schools when there is a law report, like it's been record. There is many records incident of racism. So the school doesn't look good. So the school, they can deal with the racism. The headmaster, we punish, or we will have a word with the child who called the other child an N-word, but they will not write anything down, and they will not communicate with the parents, because once they communicate with the parents, it means they have to write that down. So this is.
So Viv, that's going to be the primary thing, is that it has to be documented. That's a major key. I think so many parents who experience these things, they do word of mouth through phone calls or in-person communication, but documentation has to happen. That is legally binding in the court of law. When it's a he said, she said situation from a communication, it can really get misconstrued very quickly. And so I always encourage my students who, at my school where I am in Greenville County, we have a bullying thing that's attached to their computer, so they can make an anonymous documentation that goes to the district and to the school like that. The children can. Yeah. So, but parents can also do those things. They can file formal complaints. So documentation is necessary. Emails, written letters that are stamped by the postal office, major key.
It makes me want to question why the school, I was just going to say, it makes me want to question why the school would not want to be forthcoming with at least keeping documentation of those incidents. Is it because maybe they don't perceive that they are handling it in the best way, and maybe that would come to light and create some criticism? And if so, that's a deeper issue that for me as a parent or as a community member, I would want to kind of unpack and understand a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been, because I think in England it's so complicated because of the political standards of the parties. The conservatives tend to really ignore the issues of race and pretty much as you can see, the Prime Minister, it's a mirror of a Trump. It's just the same. They stand to the same values, which completely ignore the ethnic minorities and Black people in the UK. But to be honest, it's very complicated, because in England it's just people are so emotional, but they actually don't know how they want the things to be done. We are all trying to search how to do, and we were talking about last week, and we're trying to really look how the state deals with things, and really trying to share certain templates so we can really draft our own in terms of how do you record the incident of racism. We were trying to draft a kind of new documents, really, and then a friend of ours just gave us some templates in states they use, and how you write letters to the schools. And it's a shame, because the incident happens all the time, and I mean the last month's the death of George Floyd, it has really hinted so much issues in the UK that were brushed under the carpet. so much things happening, and I mean I'm working on trying to produce a booklet which it's going to be handed in September to parents, how they can report the incidents to us, and we're really trying hard to work with wording and to be political correct, all these things, and how long it takes, and it would be really nice to see how you guys, anything you have worked on, and just to give us like an idea how we can really work our kind of creating our new information, and yeah, based on it, maybe just sharing how you have been doing for many years.
Yeah. So if anybody in this community can be a resource to Viv, please message her privately, maybe with your contact information if you're willing to have a conversation. I think one of the things that saddens me about what you shared, Viv, is that even when the students experience it, they are reluctant to even tell their parents, which means they're having to oftentimes deal with this by themselves. And, and think about it, especially as a young child, we look to our parents to self-advocate for us until we can advocate for our own selves. And so if the parents aren't aware, it saddens me what the repercussions could be by that child sitting with that experience on their own without some support. So yeah, thank you so much for your question and contributing to our discussion.
Thank you too.
Yes. Anyone else have anything that you would like to ask or add to our conversations today?
Yes.
Yes.
Glenda.
This is, oh, go on.
I was going to say, this is Glenda Morrison-Fair, and hello everyone. And I'm not going to take up much time, but when the young lady Vive, I believe it was, from England, that could be an entirely Zoom conference all by itself. It just opened my eyes when she said the George Floyd incident exposed things in England, and I'm sure it's that way maybe across the world. But getting back to the topic today, I feel like the maturity of any teacher is to be able to communicate at all levels, and that's who you have on your panel today, your speaker, and that's Charnise. I am so proud of her, as I am of you, Nika, for bringing these conversations to the forefront, because we can never make progress unless we speak the language. We have to be able to understand the language, and to understand someone's language, you have to understand their history. And you have to be willing to see things through other people's shoes. So I appreciate Charnise coming on today. I could not wait to hear what she has to say. She is certainly a diamond in the rough, and a great resource and a great blessing to Greenville, South Carolina. So I won't take up a whole lot of time because I know you started late and I don't know how much time you have, but I would love to have more of these conversations just in general, because I think we need this in Greenville and especially South Carolina. Oh, and let me add, there is a law in the books that has mandated that each school district teach African American history. That is not being adhered to. So that might be another topic that we want to, and I'm sure Charnise knows this, do you not? And I remember going to a school board conference, and the gentleman who spoke gave that information, and there was such a hush over the whole room. But there's a law in the books that mandate that we do that, and every school does not have that.
Yes. Yes, Ms. Morrison-Fair is right. There are laws in Greenville about that, and in general in education in South Carolina. And that's what I was trying to get to with Viv, is that we have to understand and know the laws ourselves so that we can act in accordance. And that's why I can't fully speak to what's going on there in England. But as far as Greenville, South Carolina is concerned, I know for a fact that these things could not happen. And if they are happening, someone's going to have a big problem, because that's illegal. That's illegal. So yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. And so, Ms. Jefferson, did you want to step in and ask your question?
Oh, yes. This has been so powerful, and especially a parent of African-American males. And for me, it's truth. Truth is everything. And as the young lady was saying from England, is you got to tell the truth, and you devalue children when you sweep up. Like the guest speaker was saying, kids see this from within the womb and see the racism and see, they know if you like them or not. Kids do that. And I used to tell my kids' teacher, if you do not like my child, you better pretend like you do, because they're here with you 6 hours a day. They're at school 5 days. They're spending more time with their teachers than they are at home. And all of us can remember a teacher that influenced us positively or negatively. Another thing I would encourage parents is go to board meetings, participate, be active in class. I volunteered. I made it a point to my boss, I need to be present in my children's classes. So we have to see what they're teaching. And my father, we had to learn the truth. I remember writing a paper on Lincoln, and my dad read it and said, none of this is true. And when I did write the truth, my teacher said that, no, we don't do this in class, and put me out of class. My niece wrote a paper on Malcolm X. They said, choose one of your heroes. She chose Malcolm X. Her teacher gave her a C-, saying he was never a hero. And it kind of, it broke her, you know, to say, why isn't he's a hero to me? So I think parents participating in any kind of meetings at the school, and I would just encourage you to read. And every summer when it was time to leave, I always gave each teacher of my children a book dealing with African-American males. And they would come back in September and say, I didn't realize that I was racist. I didn't realize that I had biases. I didn't know this about children. And one of the books that really helped me was The Counter Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys by Kwanzaa Kajufo. And it mapped out what to do. And in the 5th grade, I made sure my kids had a male strong teacher. And today, my son still, that's his mentor. And the teacher said, it was, your boys was my first students. I was 25 years old, and he said, I was so afraid because I had heard as a parent, you guys were very hands-on and was going to make sure your kids learned. He said, but they taught me how to teach Black children. And this was a non-African-American teacher. And so today, after 5 years later, he still is in my son's life as an adult. So I just encourage everyone to be active, and especially make changes in the board. I mean, be at those board meetings, be at PTA meetings, whatever. And to only way we're gonna get teachers to think differently is to hand them material, and then make sure that our kids know the truth, know their history, know about not just African history, but all history, and examine the books that they bring home. And if it doesn't have the right history in it, you question it. So thank you so much for holding this space. I'm enjoying my summer with all of your lectures and everything. So, and I'm on the California coast, so I really try and make sure I'm on this call. My job knows on Fridays when you have this, okay, between 8 o'clock and this time, I'm learning. So thank you so much for this. This has been amazing.
No, thank you so very much. And I love the idea of us as parents providing tools and resources to our teachers, the educators, so that they can know how to best educate our brown and Black kids. I love that idea. I'm going to have to definitely share that. So thank you so much for contributing to this discussion. Really appreciate that. So our time is winding down. I want to thank my guest co-host for hanging in there with me, pushing through, actually encouraging me to push through when I was really ready to just kind of give up on today. For those of you who may not have heard, we had a hacker, and it somewhat dampened our spirits just for a brief moment, but we are victorious because we pushed through. This information was very rich and useful, and I'm sure that our audience will be able to glean a lot from it. So thank you so much, Charnise. I want to give you the final remarks. If there's anything that I did not ask you about that you want to share with this community or you want to leave with us as we go forth, then please share that at this time.
Yes. Dr. White, I would just say thank you so much for having me today. To just have this intentional conversation, because I believe that it is so necessary to hold spaces like this in order to just informally come and dialogue with other people who are all wanting to do better and wanting to move the needle on the work that we are doing with diversity and inclusion, wanting to make sure that all the voices are not only heard, but also amplified. And I think that it's so important that we be about that work as individuals. And when I say that as individuals, I mean that you are learning as a person and as a human being how to be, I know this sounds crazy, teach each other how to be humane to one another, but it's something that actually needs to be taught explicitly and discussed. It's in our natural inclinations, but for some reason our flesh wants to do what is wrong all the time. And so we have to educate ourselves on those things. And a lot of that education comes with understanding history. And so I think as a history teacher, for American history specifically, I am uniquely qualified to speak on these things. And I think that another major key in what's going on in America right now is that we do our best to seek out African American voices to speak to their own experiences, because they are going to be different than our white brothers and sisters who may also be speaking on these things as well. And to hear our experiences. And even if you may say, oh, did that really happen? Really ask yourself, if you are feeling that way, why you feel that way, and investigate yourself. Always be asking the why questions about your responses and about what you think. Whatever it is you think, understand your why. It is such a major key in my opinion. And then I would lastly just like to say that it is important that not only that we do the work individually, but we share the work that we are doing individually with not only our families, but also to our friends and people outside our circles, in the sense of in the workplace. I know that that kind of can sound strange, especially for those people in America, because we don't really share those types of things. You know, we don't share what we think about certain things, because that's not appropriate conversation. But I think that our shyness about having these conversations and it being inappropriate has made it taboo, and then not speaking about it has created the fraught tensions that we have today. And so I would say, let us begin to just share what we are doing within ourselves and the knowledge that we have, and that will begin to promote a better environment and a better nation, world for everyone to be able to enjoy.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Wise words. We really appreciate you. I feel valued. I feel seen. I feel heard, simply because you accepted my invitation. So thank you so very much. I appreciate your generosity. We'll be back here next week, and we'll be back here on 7/24 at 11 a.m., 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. And my guest co-host is Michael Williams. He is the Chief Diversity Officer for Michelin North America, and he's going to share how they, as a corporation, have been navigating these very complex times of racial inequity crisis, along with, of course, the looming effects of COVID. So stay tuned. We'll look forward to seeing you all back here next week. Thank you again, Charnise. Thank you to all of you who joined. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.